But when you have that many quarterbacks and it's on you to make the right decision, all the decisions has not been conducive to what we need to do. 13 different quarterbacks. I don't care what the name on the back of their jersey says. That has to be said to something. When you have guys in this league.
Did you want to? Well, he's developed young players, maybe not young quarterback. Which young quarterback did you want him to develop?
The ones that's on your roster. The ones that you went out and drafted. The ones that you have to go out and win with or put your team in the position to win. We're talking Dylan Gabriel. We're talking Shedeur Sanders. Those are.
Dan Orlovsky just defended Kevin Stefanski's quarterback decisions with the Cleveland Browns. And Cam Newton, he wasn't having it. Not even a little bit. What followed was one of the most passionate, unfiltered breakdowns we've seen in sports media recently. And honestly, after looking at everything that went down in Cleveland, it's hard not to see where Cam's coming from. Because when you really break down what happened with those quarterbacks, with the development, with the game management, something just doesn't sit right. Let me walk you through this whole situation because there's layers to it that people aren't talking about enough. So Orlovsky comes out and basically says Kevin Stefanski is a great coach, says he'll land another head coaching position soon, says the guy deserves credit for what he did in Cleveland. And look, on paper, I get why someone might say that. The man won Coach of the Year twice. That's not nothing. But Cam Newton heard that and immediately came back with facts that paint a completely different picture. According to Cam, Stefanski went through 13 different quarterbacks during his time with the Browns. 13. Let that sink in for a second. We're not talking about a situation where a coach had bad luck with injuries or where one or two guys just didn't work out. We're talking about a revolving door at the most important position in football that spun so many times you'd get dizzy trying to count it. And Cam's whole point is this. When you have that many opportunities to find your guy, to develop your guy, to build something sustainable at the quarterback position, and you can't get it done even once, that's not on the quarterbacks anymore. That's on the coaching. That's on the system. That's on the inability to properly evaluate and develop talent at the position that matters most. From what we've seen publicly, the only real playoff success Stefanski had was back when the Browns made it in 2019. And even that run has been questioned by people who point to the talent that was already on that roster. But beyond that one season, where's the sustained success? Where's the quarterback who took a step forward under his coaching and became the answer? Orlovsky tried to shift the blame to the quarterbacks themselves, basically suggesting that the revolving door happened because the quarterback play was poor. And on the surface, sure, that sounds reasonable. But Cam wasn't buying that explanation for even a second. Because here's the thing that Cam emphasized, and this is coming from someone who actually played the position at the highest level. It is the head coach's job to develop quarterbacks. It's the head coach's job to put them in positions to succeed. It's the head coach's job to build a system that elevates their play instead of exposing their weaknesses. Think about it like this. If you're a teacher and every single student in your class fails the test, at what point do we stop blaming the students and start looking at the teaching? At what point does the pattern become so obvious that we have to acknowledge something fundamental isn't working? Stefanski had 13 chances, 13 different players to work with, different skill sets, different backgrounds, different physical tools. And not a single one of them developed into a consistent, franchise-level performer under his watch. That's not a coincidence, that's a systematic failure. And Cam Newton said what a lot of people have been thinking, but maybe haven't said this directly. Stefanski's firing wasn't just justified, it was overdue. Now, let's get specific, because this is where things get really uncomfortable when you start looking at the details. The situation with Shedeur Sanders this past season is basically a case study in everything that was wrong with how Stefanski approached quarterback development and game management. And I want to walk through this carefully because it highlights the exact issues Cam Newton was talking about. Shedeur Sanders came into the league as one of the most talented young quarterbacks in his draft class. The kid had hype. He had production in college. He had the pedigree. When Cleveland brought him in, there were expectations. Fans were excited. This felt like it could finally be the answer at quarterback that the Browns had been searching for. But then something strange started happening during training camp. Or rather, something strange didn't happen. From what multiple reports indicated, Stefanski made the decision not to give Shedeur any first-team reps during camp. Think about what that means for a second. You've got a young quarterback who needs to learn your system, who needs to build chemistry with the starting receivers, who needs to get comfortable with the speed and complexity of NFL defenses. And you're not giving him meaningful practice time with the guys he'd actually be playing with in games. How is a quarterback supposed to succeed when you don't even give him the preparation necessary to have a chance? And then, based on how things played out, it appears Stefanski just threw Shedeur into game situations without that proper preparation. Put him in the mix, asked him to perform, but hadn't given him the tools to do so effectively. That's like asking someone to build a house but not giving them a hammer or nails, and then being surprised when the construction doesn't go well. But here's what's remarkable. Despite being put in what looks like an impossible situation, Shedeur Sanders showed incredible resilience. From what we could see on the field, the kid fought. He studied. He tried to make the absolute most out of every opportunity he got. And honestly, there were moments where you could see the talent shining through despite everything else. Which brings us to the Tennessee Titans game. And this is where things get really wild. In that game, Shedeur Sanders put on a performance that had Browns fans losing their minds in the best way possible. Based on the box score and the game footage, Sanders threw 4 touchdown passes. 4. He brought the Browns roaring back into a game that looked like it was slipping away. The poise in the pocket looked solid. The accuracy on his throws was there. The leadership was evident. He orchestrated what appeared to be one of the most impressive comeback performances of the entire season. The Browns were in position to win. Everything was set up perfectly. The momentum was entirely on Cleveland's side. Sanders had the hot hand. All signs pointed to riding with the young quarterback and letting him finish what he started. But then Kevin Stefanski made a decision that left everyone scratching their heads. With the game on the line, with the Browns needing to sustain one final drive to seal the victory, Stefanski pulled Shedeur Sanders from the game. Instead of staying with the quarterback who had just thrown 4 touchdowns and brought the team back from the brink, he handed the ball to the backup and changed the entire offensive approach. And the results? Catastrophic. The final drive fell apart, the execution wasn't there, and the Browns ended up losing a game they absolutely should have won. This wasn't on Shedeur Sanders. This wasn't on the defense. Based on everything we saw, this was a coaching decision that backfired, and it cost Cleveland a crucial victory. Now, I want to be very clear here. I'm not inside that building. I don't know what conversations were happening on the sideline. I don't know what Stefanski's thought process was in that moment. Maybe there was a reason we couldn't see from the outside. Maybe there was something going on with Shedeur that wasn't public. I'm not claiming to have insider information, but from a fan perspective, from what everyone watching could see, it didn't make sense. And that's the frustrating part. When you've got a young quarterback who just gave you 4 touchdowns and you pull him in crunch time, people are going to have questions, lots of them. And this pattern of questionable decision-making wasn't isolated to just that one game. Throughout the season, there were multiple instances where it seemed like Stefanski's handling of the quarterback situation raised eyebrows. The depth chart decisions didn't always align with who was actually performing well. The rotation at times appeared to lack a clear logic from the outside looking in. There were also rumblings, and I want to be careful with how I phrase this because we're talking about reports and speculation, not confirmed facts. But there were rumblings that suggested a difficult environment in that building. Multiple reports emerged indicating that players who questioned decisions or spoke up faced consequences. Some reports suggested that players would be taken out of games or declared inactive with injury designations that people close to the situation questioned. Again, I'm not saying I can confirm any of this. I'm not claiming to know what really happened behind closed doors. But when multiple reports start pointing in the same direction, when multiple people start asking the same questions, it creates a perception problem at minimum. And specifically with Shedeur Sanders, there were reports that he was listed as injured at certain points during the season, when people around the situation suggested those injury designations might not have been entirely accurate. The implication being that these might have been convenient excuses to manage playing time rather than legitimate health concerns. If that's true, and I emphasize if because I can't confirm it, that would be a serious problem. Using injury reports to manipulate playing time isn't just unprofessional. It's a breach of trust between coach and player. It's using official league injury reporting as a tool for roster manipulation, rather than its intended purpose of transparent health communication. But again, I'm working with reports and speculation here, not hard facts. What we do know for certain is what we saw on the field and what the numbers tell us. And those numbers are stark. 13 quarterbacks over 6 years. No sustained success at the position. No development story where a quarterback clearly took meaningful steps forward under Stefanski's system and became the long-term answer. That's not subjective, that's just what happened. Now, Stephen A. Smith weighed in on this whole controversy, and his take added another layer to the conversation. Smith, who's one of the biggest voices in sports media, affirmed that the decision to fire Stefanski was the right move. His reasoning? Pretty much identical to Cam Newton's. Over 6 years, 13 different quarterbacks, and not a single one developed into a capable franchise quarterback. That's not bad luck. That's not a small sample size. That's a systematic failure. And Stephen A. made a compelling point. When you have that many opportunities to get the quarterback position right, and you fail every single time, you've proven beyond any reasonable doubt that you're not the right person for the job. The NFL is a quarterback-driven league. A head coach who cannot evaluate, develop, or properly utilize quarterback talent is going to struggle to succeed at the highest level, no matter what else they do well. Stefanski had more chances than most coaches ever get. And from what we can see in the results, those chances were squandered. So let's talk about this debate between Orlovsky and Cam Newton, because it represents a broader conversation about accountability in coaching. Orlovsky seems to be arguing that coaches should be evaluated primarily on scheme and game management. That player development failures can largely be excused if the players themselves don't pan out. It's a more sympathetic view of coaching, one that acknowledges the limitations of what a coach can control. But Cam Newton is arguing from a different perspective entirely. He's arguing from the perspective of someone who actually played the game, who knows what it takes to develop as a quarterback, who understands the importance of coaching in that process. His position is that coaches must be held accountable for development, for creating environments where players can succeed, for making smart decisions that give their teams the best chance to win. And when you look at the Shedeur Sanders situation specifically, Cam's argument gets even stronger. Because this wasn't just about a quarterback not working out. Based on what we saw publicly, this appeared to be a situation where a talented young quarterback wasn't even given a fair shot, wasn't given the preparation, wasn't given consistent opportunities, and even when he performed well, got pulled at crucial moments. That's not developing a quarterback. That's not putting a player in position to succeed. That's the opposite. Now, I want to be fair to Stefanski in one respect. Coaching in Cleveland is not easy. The Browns have been a challenging organization for a long time. There's pressure from ownership, pressure from fans, constant media scrutiny, and a history of dysfunction that predates any single coach. It's not like he walked into an ideal situation, but here's the thing. Every coach in the NFL faces challenges. Every coach deals with difficult situations, ownership pressure, media scrutiny, and roster limitations. That's the job, and at some point you have to produce results despite those challenges. You have to find a way to develop players, especially at the most important position. And the results just weren't there. Across multiple seasons, multiple draft classes, multiple free agent acquisitions, the quarterback position remained unstable. That has to fall on somebody. And when you're the head coach, when you're the offensive-minded head coach specifically, that falls on you. What makes this whole situation even more frustrating from a fan perspective is thinking about what could have been with Shedeur Sanders specifically. The kid showed flashes. He showed toughness. He showed the ability to perform under pressure. That 4-touchdown performance against Tennessee wasn't a fluke. That was real quarterback play against an NFL defense. But instead of building on that, instead of using that as a foundation to grow from, it seems like the opportunity was wasted. And for Browns fans who have been waiting for decades to find their franchise quarterback, that has to hurt. Because what if Shedeur was the guy? What if, with proper development and consistent opportunity, he could have been the answer? We'll never know now because the situation didn't allow for that development to happen. And that's the tragedy in all of this. Not just for the Browns organization, not just for Kevin Stefanski, but for the players whose careers were impacted by these decisions. Quarterbacks don't get unlimited chances in the NFL. The window is short. If you don't get proper development early in your career, if you don't get put in positions to succeed, it can derail everything. Shedeur Sanders is young enough that he'll get other opportunities. His talent is undeniable. Some other team is going to take a shot at developing him properly, but for the Browns, they're back at square one. Again, looking for answers at quarterback. Again, hoping the next coach can solve a problem that's haunted this franchise for decades. The contrast between how Orlovsky and Newton approach this topic is stark, and it reveals something about how we talk about accountability in sports. Orlovsky, as a former quarterback himself, seems to be giving grace to the coaching side, understanding the complexities, the challenges, the limitations, and there's value in that perspective. Not every failure is solely the coach's fault, but Newton is approaching it from the standpoint of someone who knows what it takes to succeed at that position, who understands how important coaching is to quarterback development, who can see when a situation isn't set up for success, and his passion in defending his position comes from that place of experience and understanding. When Cam says Stefanski going through 13 quarterbacks without developing any of them is unacceptable, he's not being unfair. He's holding a coach accountable for the most fundamental part of his job. When he points out that Shedeur wasn't given first-team reps in training camp, he's highlighting a decision that makes no sense if your goal is actually to develop the quarterback. When he talks about the Tennessee Titans game, he's pointing to a specific moment where a coach made a decision that directly cost his team a win. These aren't baseless attacks. These are legitimate criticisms rooted in what actually happened on the field and in how the situation was managed. And the fact that Stephen A. Smith, who has no particular allegiance to Cam Newton or any agenda against Kevin Stefanski, came to essentially the same conclusion independently, that adds credibility to the criticism. When multiple people who understand football at different levels all arrive at the same basic conclusion, maybe that conclusion has merit. The question people keep asking is, how does a coach go through 13 quarterbacks without any of them working out? What does that say about the evaluation process? What does that say about the development program? What does that say about the system being run? Because here's the reality. Even if some of those 13 quarterbacks were legitimate busts, even if some of them truly didn't have the talent to succeed at the NFL level, shouldn't at least one or two of them have shown meaningful improvement? Shouldn't there be at least one success story of a quarterback who came in raw and left better? One player who took a step forward under that coaching, even if they didn't become a star? The fact that there isn't even one example of that is telling. And when you add in the specific mismanagement of Shedeur Sanders, who clearly had talent and showed he could perform at a high level, it becomes even harder to defend. Because that wasn't a talent problem, that was an opportunity and development problem. Now, some people might say I'm being too hard on Stefanski. Some people might point to his 2 Coach of the Year awards and say that proves he's a good coach. And look, those awards aren't meaningless. You don't win Coach of the Year in the NFL without doing something right. But here's the counter-argument. Those awards often go to coaches who exceed expectations in a particular season, not necessarily to coaches who build sustained success. And sustained success, especially at the quarterback position, is what actually matters in the long run. One good season doesn't offset 6 years of quarterback instability. The Browns organization clearly came to that conclusion. They looked at the overall body of work, looked at the lack of development at quarterback, looked at the repeated inability to find stability at the position, and decided it was time for a change. And based on everything we've seen, can you really blame them? Cleveland is a city that's been patient with this team for a very long time. The fans have endured decades of disappointment, of promising starts that led nowhere, of quarterbacks who were supposed to be the answer, but weren't. At some point, you have to try something different. At some point, you have to acknowledge that what you're doing isn't working and make a change. Stefanski's tenure will be remembered for a lot of things. The 2 Coach of the Year awards will be part of that legacy. Some good regular season moments will be part of that legacy. But the 13 quarterbacks and the lack of development at the position will also be part of that legacy. And unfortunately for him, that might be what people remember most. Because in the NFL, you're judged by what you do at the most important position. And what happened at quarterback in Cleveland under Stefanski's watch was, by any objective measure, not good enough. The whole situation raises uncomfortable questions that don't have easy answers. How do you evaluate a coach who wins Coach of the Year awards but can't develop quarterbacks? How do you balance scheme and game management success against fundamental failures in player development? How do you determine when a coach has had enough chances to figure something out? These aren't simple questions, and reasonable people can disagree on the answers. But what Cam Newton is saying, and what Stephen A. Smith echoed, is that after 6 years and 13 quarterbacks, the answers to those questions became clear. The pattern was established. The track record spoke for itself. And when you add in the specific handling of Shedeur Sanders, when you look at a situation where a talented young quarterback appeared to be mismanaged from training camp through the season, ending with him getting pulled after throwing 4 touchdowns, the case for change becomes even stronger. Orlovsky can defend Stefanski all he wants. He can talk about scheme and preparation and all the things coaches do behind the scenes that fans don't see. And maybe all of that is true. Maybe Stefanski is great at a lot of aspects of coaching. But if you can't get the quarterback position right in 6 years with 13 different players, none of that other stuff matters enough. Because the NFL is a quarterback league, and head coaches who can't solve that position don't last. That's not unfair. That's not overly harsh. That's just the reality of the league. The debate between Orlovsky and Newton will probably continue. People who side with Orlovsky will point to the complexities of coaching, the challenges Stefanski faced, the talent limitations on the roster. People who side with Newton will point to the results, or lack thereof, at the quarterback position, and argue that's the ultimate measure of success for an offensive head coach. But what's undeniable is that Cam Newton's passion in making his case resonated with a lot of people. Because it came from a place of understanding what young quarterbacks need to succeed, what proper development looks like, and what accountability means in coaching. His breakdown wasn't just an emotional rant. It was a detailed indictment backed by facts, by specific examples, and by a clear understanding of what went wrong. And when someone with Cam Newton's credibility, someone who played the position at the highest level and won an MVP, comes out that strongly against a coaching decision, people listen. Because he's been there. He knows what it takes. He understands the game from a perspective most people don't have. So where does this leave everything? The Browns have moved on from Stefanski and are looking for their next head coach. Shedeur Sanders' future in Cleveland is uncertain, though based on how things went, it wouldn't be surprising if he ends up elsewhere looking for a fresh start. And the debate about whether Stefanski deserved more time or whether his firing was justified will continue in sports media circles. But the numbers are what they are. 13 quarterbacks, 6 years, no sustained success at the position, no development story to point to as evidence that the system worked even once. Cam Newton looked at those numbers, looked at how Shedeur Sanders was handled specifically, looked at the decision-making in crucial moments like the Tennessee game, and said what a lot of people were thinking. This wasn't working, the accountability has to fall somewhere, and 6 years was more than enough time to figure it out. Whether you agree with how passionately he made that case or not, it's hard to argue with the substance of what he was saying. Because at the end of the day, results matter. And the results at the quarterback position in Cleveland weren't there. That's not Orlovsky's opinion. That's not Newton's opinion. That's just what happened. And sometimes when you look at what actually happened, without trying to explain it away or provide context that softens the impact, the truth is uncomfortable but clear. Maybe Stefanski will get another opportunity. Maybe he'll land somewhere else and find more success, particularly if he's in a situation where the quarterback position is already stable and he can focus on other aspects of coaching. But for now, his time in Cleveland is over. And the legacy of that tenure will be forever tied to the instability at the most important position on the field. And based on everything we've seen, everything that's been reported, everything that played out in public view, it's hard to say that ending should have been different. Cam Newton certainly doesn't think so. Stephen A. Smith doesn't think so. And a whole lot of Browns fans, after watching this play out year after year, probably don't think so either. The question now becomes, what's next? For the Browns, it's finding someone who can finally solve the quarterback problem that's plagued this franchise for decades. For Shedeur Sanders, it's hopefully finding a situation where he can be properly developed and given a real chance to show what he can do. And for Kevin Stefanski, it's figuring out what went wrong and how to avoid the same issues if he gets another opportunity. But this debate, this passionate back and forth about accountability and development and what coaches should be judged on, that's not going away. Because it cuts to the heart of what we expect from leadership in the NFL and what standards we hold coaches to when they have the most important job in sports. Cam Newton drew his line in the sand. Dan Orlovsky drew his. And now everyone else gets to decide which side makes more sense based on what we all saw happen in Cleveland over the past 6 years. What do you think? Does Cam have a point, or is there something we're all missing about what Stefanski was dealing with? Because this conversation is far from over.